How Credit Unions Can Better Compete and Win in 2022. Thank you for joining us. I'm Lori McLaughlin, Chief Marketing Officer at Digital Onboarding, and I'm joined today by our moderator, Stessa Cohen. She's an industry expert in global consumer banking over at PivotAssets, Julie Katalinich, SVP of Member Services at DCU. Dan McCarthy, Chief Administrative Officer at Del One FCU, Michael Thomas, Vice President of Marketing at Greater Nevada Credit Union. Sherod will be hopefully joining us very soon. And we also have Ted Brown, co-founder and CEO at Digital Onboarding. I want to just let you know a couple things before I pass it over to Stessa. First off, everyone will receive a recording of today's session via email. And separately, there's a Q&A function at the bottom of your screen on the right. Feel free to submit questions anytime and we'll address them at the end. And with that, I'm going to introduce our moderator, Stessa Cohen.
Thank you, Lori, and welcome everyone to this webinar. We're going to start. Radin reports that just 12% of Americans identify their credit union as their primary financial institution. The major banks, as I'm sure you're well aware, are still winning consumers' hearts and minds. In fact, many credit unions are still marketing like it's 2005. They continue to hang their hats on value propositions like investing in the community, the advantages of a nonprofit, and outstanding service. And these are fine values. There is nothing wrong with these values, and they're still important. But the generic promises of these values aren't enough to outsmart the competition. The consumer banking industry looks a lot different than it did a year ago, much less 17, almost 20 years ago. Consolidation, the rise of neobanks, the digital imperative have completely changed the game and the landscape in which you must compete today. So how do you move from 2005 to 2022? Solve for friction. Solve for friction. Neobanks have been especially good at this, at eliminating friction from financial services. And when they do this, they acquire lots of new customers and they create small, low friction innovations that address the needs of niche groups. When we typically talk about friction in financial services, we often focus on account opening. Now, that's not a bad thing. There's a lot of friction to take out of account opening. But if credit unions really want to disrupt financial services, and there's an opportunity still to do so, to really compete against banks and neobanks and fintechs, credit unions must resist adding friction to processes, but relentlessly use all the digital technologies that are available to them. Not only at mobile devices, not only on the web browser, but in every process and every transaction. In our conversation today, we're going to focus on the practical, not the fantastical, ways that you can make your members' experiences easier, reduce friction, increase membership, and start disrupting in 2022. So how are we going to do that? We're going to do that by exploring why the promise of great service isn't enough. We're going to look at what innovative credit unions, and guess what, they're here today, are doing to gain competitive advantage. And finally, identify the top strategies that your credit union can implement in 2022 to leapfrog competitors. So let's dig right in. And let's wait a second. I believe one more member of our panel has joined.
Wonderful. This is Lori McLaughlin again. I would like to introduce Sherod Halliburton, who is CEO of Financial Access Federal Credit Union. Welcome to the conversation.
Well, thank you, thank you. And I do apologize. I mean, how ironic is it? My team had a meeting with Digital Onboarding at 1 o'clock today. So I'm sitting on a link with Joan, and I'm wondering why my colleagues aren't on this call. Turns out that I was on the wrong link, so I do apologize, guys.
You made it just in time.
Okay.
Great. Great. So we're going to start the conversation, Sherod. I hope your engines are revved and everyone else. So let's start with why the promise of great service isn't enough these days. And I think one reason we can start addressing is that the competition has changed, right? It used to be the bank down the street or the credit union on the other side of town. So who are your competitors today? Can we just go around and talk briefly? And I'm going to put you on the spot, Sherod, because I know you have some opinions.
Well, given we are a low-income designated credit union, and we also do small business lending, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say everyone who's in financial services lending at all is a competitor, whether it be a payday lender, whether it be the bank down the street, whether it be the credit union down the street, whether it be Chime, whether it be these digital banks that are so aggressively out acquiring members, customers. We are competing with everyone who's in the financial services and lending business.
How about anyone else? Anyone else find themselves competing with fintechs or neobanks?
I think something to jump in with is it's not just competing to get them, but it's competing to keep your members and your customers every day, because they can go anywhere, anytime. And we're stating the obvious here, but as credit unions, we have to get out of the way of thinking it's just other credit unions. To the earlier point, it's everybody, everywhere, every day, 24 hours a day. And I think that's something that all of us have to keep in mind if we want to stay vital and real in the industry.
And the only thing I'd add, Stessa, is I agree with everything here, but also I think it's not just who the competitors are today, but who our competitors are going to be in the future. And I'm very focused on looking at Amazon and Apple and even a company like Starbucks or even T-Mobile. They're all getting into the space, and the reason why I think they are getting into the space is the landscape has changed and what people view as their primary relationships. When we know, the stats show people spend more time with their mobile devices than they do with their significant others. Why would it not be T-Mobile's focus to say we want to become a bank because people have their phones in front of us? So I do think every so often we have to not only look up from where we're focused, but also look a little bit ahead.
And I think Julie, you also wanted to chime in there.
Yeah, I agree with everything that's said, and it's not just people who are offering financial services or will be offering financial services. It's the experience that you're competing against. And when you can, with one touch of a button, order something and have it delivered to you in a day or 2 days, that's becoming the more common experience. And I think when you talk about service in a credit union, you're talking about, treating people really well and giving great advice. And its service is a little bit more starting to be about the experience and the ease of use. And like you said, something that's extremely frictionless. So you're not just competing against other offerings for financial institutions. You're also looking at experiences and how they experience you. They're comparing to fintechs or these great companies that very frictionlessly can get you whatever you need.
So that was a great segue. I mean, next question is do your credit unions deliver on the promise of service everywhere, not just face-to-face, which is still important? How do you use or not use digital technologies everywhere, like at branches? Does your credit union assume all service is human-based? Can each of you talk a little bit about this? I mean, maybe Michael, you want to start?
Sure. Well, I think it's a good introduction to say I'm relatively new to the credit union space. So I've only been in this role a couple of years. So I came in right at COVID, but I'll just focus on that for a second. We all are kind of fatigued with COVID, but I think as marketers or as leaders of experience in our organizations, we really need to realize how COVID fast-tracked trends that were already happening within society. And I did, get an opportunity to hear a lot of different leaders, but the head of Visa gave a really poignant talk about where Visa was heading, and they used the experience of his mother who tried ordering groceries online for the first time. And the reason why I point to those types of experiences, and Julie hit upon them, it's frictionless. It's like so many new things have been tried, I think it's important to sit back and to say, as a credit union, we are trying to get out of thinking about channel delivery. And I'll expand upon that, because I think a lot of our experiences, or at least what I've noticed, is that it's like, well, that's our call center. And so we get very focused on, well, that means it's a call. And I think we do need to sort of start differently when we think about experiences, to say, what's a multi-channel experience that's focused on the member or the customer or the prospect, and really not be so locked into the way that the channels perform today. So I think, a takeaway is you have to get those discussions started. And what I have found, even in a mid-sized credit union like ours, is that there's a lot of silos. And so you have to bring different groups to the table and get them to start thinking about what is the experience we want to deliver, and not get so locked up into only thinking about the way that technology is being delivered today. And I think we all had to go through that under duress during COVID. I just hope that the industry, and I'm speaking across the board, really continues to take that approach of being nimble and trying to adapt to what members and customers are asking us to do.
Yeah, I think looking at those silos is important. And, kind of going back to that last conversation of the competition, I like to say we should really define or talk about what is the race. What is the race that we're running? What are we trying to achieve? So, for example, Amazon being a potential competitor, which race are they running? Are they running the race to serve a household with all of the financial needs that they could have? Probably not. They're running a different race. Or Chime, maybe eventually they're running in that race, but right now they're running in sort of the wedge, which is the checking account or a transactional account. So I think that race is getting redefined to an extent.
Right.
And rather than, thinking about it as we're losing the race on the number of people who open up a checking account, we should really be looking at, are we serving, what's our relationship with the household that we're looking to serve? And breaking down those silos that you bring up, Michael, I think is huge. And it all relates with the friction in between these silos. And to really kind of redefine what are we truly looking to do and compete and win on? And I think the answer ought to be, we should be competing for that household. So even if one of their 7, accounts is with Chime or is with Amazon, or maybe one of their 8 accounts, how do they see us as an institution, and how can we best serve this household so that we are a meaningful part of their financial life?
Yeah, I think it's probably a mistake for any financial institution to say, I'm going to be the primary or only bank that this customer uses. I mean, that even as far back as maybe 10 years ago, consumers were saying, I have 3, 4 relationships. I'm sure it's more than that now, because so much has been decentralized. But yeah, I mean, why fight that if you can't control it, right? You can't control what consumers do. And I think, to your point, Michael, the pandemic has made that even more clear. There's so much out of our control that if a financial institution isn't ready to kind of close its doors and operate without a branch, they're not learning anything. I'm not saying that they should, but they need to be prepared for one reason or another, whether it's a pandemic or a flood or a fire. I mean, it's just, so those learnings can influence the service you provide. Like, can you provide great service despite all that? Can you pivot quickly enough?
May I comment on that, Stessa?
Sure.
The original question was, what digital services are you providing? And I look at my institution, and we've made an effort to provide a variety of different ways for members to interact with us, from shared branching, to ATM networks, to technology. One of the challenges is, how do you clearly articulate that all of these channels are available, and how do you migrate your members to use those channels? I'll share a personal story. I'm CEO of a financial institution, really focusing on improving the digital usage from my members. But I get my rent check for my apartments, and I drop them at the bank account that I've been dropping them into for 20 years. I drive across town, go to that bank. All of a sudden the branch closed. And then I was at the ATM. All of a sudden they moved the ATM. And it was at that point in time that me as a CEO promoting a product realized that I had a use for the product that I had not been taking advantage of myself. And so the challenge is all of these channels are out there. How do we articulate that they're out there and how do we move people forward? I'm gonna give a shout out to digital onboarding. At least how I vision it, I want to corral the platform that they have in place and use that as my mechanism to connect to my members and use that as a mechanism to move my members to the type of access that I think they benefit from. Our motto is meet them where they are and try to move them to a more efficient and effective manner to bank.
So kind of building on what Sherod is saying, like how have your credit unions addressed friction and service? How do you pull out the friction to make it easier to access service to your members? How do you let them know that there are all these ways to access service? And by the way, I don't think retail banks do a great job of it either. So I think this is, hopefully they're not listening.
You know what, I can speak for our side that something we did is we made the actual member experience, the breakdown of every single step, a specific responsibility of one of our senior people for walking through what does it take to become a member. And it's something, and just using that example, it was something that we had too many manual touches. And if it took a day, that was like hitting a home run. We now do it in 2 to 4 minutes on average for 85% of the applications that come in online. But that was a painful process that 3 or 4 of our smartest people took on. And then they moved on to personal loans. Now they're on auto loans. So it's breaking down each and every piece and not just assuming, okay, Michael runs marketing, he'll take care of his piece. And Julie runs ops and she'll take care of her piece. It's saying you're responsible for breaking this down. And then we have all the resources together. So it can't be, like we said, it can't be a silo approach to stay away from cliches, but it's got to be one person's responsibility. And then it doesn't have to be the same person's every time, but making it clear that this is something that is across the board and that we will make it. And we set the goal to do it in 3 minutes. And at first everybody laughed and then we did it.
Right. And
Nice.
and for sure, those neobanks, those new digital banks are timing everything too.
Yep.
And that's a great way to get into if great service isn't enough to compete and in fact differentiate you in the environment, because let's face it, that's something that credit unions have promoted for a very long time for good reason. How do we differentiate now? And I really believe that friction or lack of it introduces a competitive edge for credit unions. Why? Because you can more easily get your hands around a process, a transaction than larger institutions just because of sheer size, and reduce it and use it as an opportunity to say, hey, we're 3 times faster than our competitors in this area. And, that becomes a difference. I mean, there's a billboard on a highway near me. I think it's a community bank or a credit union promotes about how fast it is to open an account. I don't know why somebody speeding by at 70 miles an hour needs to know that, but I did apparently to remember it. And Dan brought up a great thing about how you measure ease of doing business with your credit union. One way is number of minutes, right? What other measurements do folks use at the credit union to measure ease of use of whether it's opening an account or doing anything? Have you changed your measurements?
Yeah, I love that. I'll jump in, and there's a couple things I love about this conversation. One is that we're really talking about the member, and that it's worth pointing out because I think there's a lot of people, maybe some people on the call, as financial institutions, we generally do a good job of efficiencies. So we look into service channels to try to create efficiencies. That's a plus. Really, when we're looking at combining digital and human interactions, it really ought to be about the member and the member's experience and that service component. And the other thing that I like that Stessa, you're just bringing up is how do we measure it? how do we measure success? So we're talking about the time it takes to open up an account. Well, we like to define onboarding differently. I'll speak as the onboarding guy, as really, that's a transaction, that's all good, but we haven't won the race. The race is to actually be a meaningful part of that person's life or, financial household's life. So really we ought to be measuring active users, measuring the point, how quick and how easy it is to bank with you, not how easy and quick is it to open up an account. That's really just step one of a longer journey. And the other point that I like about this conversation around service is that it really is service. It's not sales. And I find very often we're talking about these things in a sales sense, when someone asks you for something, let's say just a simple checking account, onboarding's not, okay, can I get you a credit card too? Can I get you an auto loan too? It's, let me help you use that product. So it really is service that ought to lead to some sort of quote unquote sale later. Or if it's an auto loan, how do I, through all my different channels, make sure you have auto pay set up and you know about it so you don't accidentally default. I'm helping you with the product, and I'm using many different channels to help and earn that relationship.
And,
I like a lot about where this conversation is coming from. And particularly, I think it's worth noting that this is around the member that we're talking, not about making it easier for the institution necessarily, even though that is a nice benefit.
Yeah, and I think one of the challenges here, and another way to pull out more friction and to make the members' experience easier and better, is stop caring so much about the boundaries. Is this account opening or is this onboarding? Is this service or is this sales? Well, if somebody gets mad at something, it's not a sale. It's adding friction. So you can market to them after that all you want, but if it took them too long, or they couldn't accomplish what they wanted, or they didn't get advice when they needed it, that's going. So I see that blurring of the boundaries as these things come together as a good thing and a way to pull more friction out of the process. How have you experienced that in your credit unions, and how do you see that? Do you see an opening for that?
Sure, Stessa. I'll just share one maybe tangible takeaway, and it does relate to digital onboarding. We're relatively new in our usage of the platform, but specifically around opening. One key takeaway I think is it's really important if you are trying to define an experience level, is I've seen a lot of organizations that kind of focus on the end state, which is like a measurement across their entire customer base or their entire membership base. And that can be very deceiving, right? So we use a scorecard metric here we call digital engagement, which is using at least a couple of different platforms and usage on a regular basis. That's a great scorecard, but it's sort of deceiving if you look across the entire membership base, because I believe strongly you sort of gain in an industry like financial services, it's very low interest and high competition. So people need you when they need you, and then they want to forget about you, as much as we don't like to really admit that. And so I think it's important to really have those metrics to be like, if we started something new, is there a lift in that cohort or that group that's going through this new experience? And I only pause there because that takes time, and that takes buy-in from the departments to look at those, I call them micro doses of data. And I always say it's important here not to just be data driven, but be data informed. And what I mean by that nuance is you have to use a bit of your gut and a bit of your heart and a bit of what your team is telling you, and then let data give you a direction to go into. So my takeaway for this is whatever initiative you're looking to start, make sure you can really try to get a good subset directionally to say, is this working the way that we thought? Because if you take a new experience and just weave it into the old data you've been tracking, it can really deceive you to make you think you're not making an impact.
Yeah, so let's talk about some of those innovations, or small innovations, as I've started to call them. Is that, it's those big projects are really nice, the multi-year projects that are going to transform everything. But how can credit unions innovate without spending tons of money and get that return, whatever it is, however you want to measure it, ideally in increasing engagement, increasing usage of products and services, without spending all that money? I just want to share a little anecdote. I shared a small thing on LinkedIn that I saw where somebody had measured taken a sheet and labeled one end the short end and one end the long end. Like that this was an innovation, a small innovation. And I commented that like this sheet innovation, this small labeling, financial institutions could innovate in that way and really be disruptive and really go big with this small thing. And have a huge impact on people's lives, because how many of us have sat there for too much time trying to make your bed because you don't know which end goes where. And as if to prove my point, this is one of my most popular posts on LinkedIn. It really struck a nerve. And so what are those small innovations like that usually, what are the things that credit unions maybe overlook? What are the low-hanging fruit that you can take out right away? It's what Michael was talking about, and address. One example might be accounts that are closed during the first year. You know, maybe they opened it and then didn't do anything with it, or whatever it is. I mean, how can you address that? It's an opportunity. They're already members. What kind of things are credit unions doing to innovate here?
I'm sorry, go ahead, Sherod.
You know, just real quick, if I look at it perhaps a little bit different. I look at a technology plan that is more comprehensive and then smaller pieces. I say that because I've done smaller things without consideration of the bigger picture. And then this small thing didn't integrate with my core. Then my core contract didn't expire until 3 years. You know, so there is some value. And I think the point that Stessa is trying to make is a valid one. And that is, don't become overwhelmed with the bigness of it all. Right. I think that's a very important point. But there has to be coordination around your technology strategy. Even if you start with a little thing, it has to be in conjunction with these other things that you want to do. So if you're taking Stessa's guidance, look at little things you could do, but look at how they relate to the bigger picture as well. Right. You know, make sure that those little steps are moving you in the right direction and will not require you to course correct when the big stuff comes online. So it is a combination of understanding the bigger picture and focusing on the little steps that get you to the big picture.
Okay, so Julie, can you jump in here? I knew you had something.
Yeah. I just think it's important to note that an important factor, you know, we started off by saying some credit unions are still marketing like it was 2005. And although somewhat unpopular opinion, we have to, you know, members come to us or potential members come to us because they want an auto loan, they want a new car, they want a new house, they need a mortgage. They don't come to us to become a member.
Right.
And so we have to frictionlessly meet that need and then build the relationship from that point. And if we can frictionlessly and easily and happily meet that need, they're going to be more open to further engagement. And this is kind of the start of how I started at DC working with digital onboarding, because what we were trying to do is bring, you know, that personalized experience of who we are at DCU to the digital channel. So we had these members opening online because they wanted the great auto loan rate. They wanted these things, and they don't really understand who we are like they would if they had come into a branch and opened an account with one of our MSRs. So this was the problem that we were having, is that we were really, you know, looking at improving our online process, getting that auto loan out there, making it really easy, but then they were there. And where do we go from there, and how do we bring that personalized experience? And I think, when Ted and I started talking in the early stages, that was kind of the perfect match, that bringing them this journey digitally that was a little more personalized to who they were and what they were doing after we had already provided what they came to us for, that we could then start building that relationship. And that was kind of the idea of using a small innovation to push engagement forward.
Right. I think the only people that go looking for bank relationships are industry analysts, and, you know, because we're bank nerds. So we have a really relevant question from the audience. What levels of digital transformation in lending and deposits have the panelists experienced or developed to date? I mean, what?
I could jump in here on just something we've done from like a business intelligence standpoint, and then leveraging DO moving forward as we start our relationship even deeper, is understanding at what point, and this is just an example, at what point does a member go for an auto loan, right? So the typical person keeps their car for 30 months, so that you start being able to utilize the data to say, hey, this person's had this car for 28 months. We're going to start marketing to them, even though they haven't come to us to say, I want an auto loan, because we know from an intelligence standpoint, on average, it's about when it is. Maybe they're like me and they keep their car forever because they're cheap, but I am not the typical person, right? So start getting it out there and being able to have the right ads for the right people. So from a digital transformation, this is a little bit different than the service, but it's more the intelligence side, and then showing the different channels as to how you can let somebody know you're there for them before they even know that they need it. And that's something we've begun to do, and we're seeing it in fits and starts at the beginning, and now it's really making an impact on both some of our mortgage lending, home equity lending, as well as on all the other products that we're able to offer.
Interesting. And kind of a follow-up question around that in terms of gaining new members, bringing new members on board digitally. I mean, how are each of your credit unions doing that? And do you know how people come to your website or to your customer service line? How do they find you? Is it through Google search, or do you have other technology that you're working with to bring in new members? I mean, because this is interesting. It goes along to, people aren't looking for a credit union or a digital. They don't wake up in the morning and say, I want to join a digital bank. just people like me, which is not normal. So yeah, I'll throw that out there for. I mean, Julie, your credit union is all digital. So why don't we start with you?
Yeah, we do, Google, we're in Google searches. We do a lot to look at bringing in new members. And, we've recently added on Adobe digital marketing and Adobe Analytics to our website to kind of capture some more of that as well. But I think the interesting thing, and most people don't know this, we are a digital credit union. We it actually is, we're called Digital Credit Union because of our initial sponsor was Digital Equipment Corporation. And we, when we lost our sponsor company, we obviously have a lot more sponsor companies now. We shortened it to be digital because we were trying to go digital first. So, but yeah, we do look at a lot of different ways to reach out and expand in the community. Especially our footprint is mostly in Massachusetts and New Hampshire, but we are nationwide. So some of our community events are located around our branches, but we do try to reach out nationally through, websites and searches and so forth. So again, I think it's important to attract the consumer to what they need at the time, and then build that relationship with them after. So I think that's kind of what we're looking at trying to do and improving on that process.
And if I may, Stessa, as a multiple common bond credit union, we've not invested a lot of time and energy into the analytics, with the Google, meaning that our membership base is captured. So we've spent our time identifying employment groups, identifying associations, more of a old school traditional approach to identifying groups that we then mine. But I will say this, I hired recently a gentleman from a larger community development credit union, and he's our community engagement person. Mm-hmm. And we have digital onboarding for our membership, members join our credit when you have a digital process. He was blown away about how easy it was for him to go out and meet with potential prospects and then direct them to the website to join the credit union. He came into my office and he said, oh my goodness, I can just direct them to the credit union. They become a member in 5 minutes, whereas before I had this stack of paper and I had to call the people and tell them to do this, that, and the other. So we're not nearly as sophisticated with this as Julie is, but even just having a digital point where people jump on has made a tremendous difference.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Stessa,
and
if I
I
could-
think one of the challenges that many credit unions have is they bury that new account opening, how to become a member, so far down in their website. And it's not to pick on anyone in particular. I've seen this over the last few years. So I'm sorry, Ted wanted also to jump in here. So
Yeah, I'm loving the conversation. I think that, Julie, I love that you told that story, because when we talk about digital transformation, and even this question about what have you done in terms of transformation for deposits or loans, it really, the long pole of the tent's data, right? And data is the thing that's hard, and that's going to take multiple years for us as an industry to get there. So the question becomes, to your point, Sherod, not either or, it's yes and. And to your story, Julie, what can we do in the meantime, right? Does it mean that we have to keep on just mailing a postcard out until the data project's finished? And of course, the answer is no. There's a lot of these low-hanging fruits. And I like that, Daniel, your example went right to data, which is what are we doing? We're looking for opportunities, and we're kind of taking some shortcuts as we go on that longer digital transformation path. But it doesn't mean it can't be a yes
Right.
and that digital experience can be one of those low-hanging fruits that you can get to and improve over time as the data sources get richer. And it's important to make sure we're on both that long-term path, but we find these short-term opportunities as
right.
well.
And that goes to what Sherod brought up before. You have to have a strategy, a broader strategy, and we're going to get to that in a second. But if you can't cut friction and make the experience better and do new things now, I think credit unions are going to miss this opportunity that you have to actually disrupt. I mean, not all financial services experiences are great, and people are in bad relationships, that they can't get out of, like Sherod was with his rent checks, and the solution isn't far. But how do you get there when people need you? Because, and that's a balance, pairing small and larger innovations. I wanted to touch on one topic before we move to strategy, is that are credit unions are you thinking about reinventing existing services like bill payment, personal financial management, and those things to disrupt? Because I think those are also opportunities to disrupt, because, well, PFM, I mean, I've been covering that. I've looked at that for years now, and most people don't use it. And it's service, it's advice, it's helping a family or somebody. So
I think the reason why most people don't use PFM, this is a personal opinion, is that it's a lot of work. Yep. You have to categorize your payments, and it's not as easy as it used to be, because you knew when you went to ABC grocery store, oh, those were groceries. Well, now you go to Target, and at Target you could be buying a new TV and groceries. So determining how you would put that out into different categories. Most people know DCU has a fintech innovation center in Boston, and we partnered with digital onboarding outside of, through that relationship. And then another relationship that came out of that, when you talk about going from small to larger innovation, is project finance, which we are going to be launching within the first quarter, a brand new online banking, online mobile, same experience, with tools. One of the tools is called Future Look. So you can take a look at, if you're looking at your checking account, here's, where your balance is going, and your, most common income and expenses. And then you can go in and play around, hey, I'm a bartender. If I pick up 3 extra shifts, how does that make my cash flow look? Is it worth it? If I want to buy something and I'm going to put it on my credit card and it's going to be $50 more a month, I can go in and play with that and see what it does to my cash flow. Which I think is, as a credit union, we all know we want to provide financial services, but our real goal is to help people realize their financial goals and be financially well.
Right.
And I think that, how do you get that across? Because that's really the difference,
And if somebody doesn't want to incur, say, credit card debt, how do I save for this?
Yep.
Right. I know I'm going to need this, or I want this. How do I save for that?
Yeah.
And
It has,
don't tell me to
goal
drink
setting.
fewer lattes. I mean, that's not helpful. Not helpful.
Yeah.
Exactly. That is not going to move the needle, Stessa. You're absolutely right.
Well, yeah, I've been on this for years, looking for providers to provide that, push it out towards the member rather than, well, you do all this work and maybe we'll provide some insight that you might be able to use if you dig deep enough. I mean, I'm starting to see bill payment capabilities push this categorization out, push this stuff out, saying, oh, we see you pay X for insurance. You could get it cheaper here, but it has to be based on, data again. And it may not be data that you currently use or own, which makes it a challenge, right? Because, that's something new we haven't done before.
I think it's worth saying there's a difference between analytics and insights. So Julie just pointed to a couple things, saying that it's useful for me to know if I pick up a couple shifts, I can be at this point. Not here is a line by line detail of every place I'm spending my money. It's okay, how much cash do I have to spend? And what could I be doing differently to change that? I think it's good to think about what do members want versus what do we think members want. And PFM is one of those examples of us as financial professionals say, you should care about this. And the members say, no, I don't care about a detailed list of everywhere my pennies are going. I care about, the things that Julie's talking about.
Right.
Yeah, there are technologies that are popping up outside of our institutions that really impact our institutions, and we sometimes ignore them. For instance, my members go out to Credit Karma, and I do apologize for kind of calling out an entity. And you think that's harmless because it's like, I do want them to understand their credit score and I do want them to understand how to manage that, but they're being inundated with offers by other financial institutions. So there's technology out there that we may think might help our members, but that technology is also introducing other opportunities to your members. So we may want to look at, bringing some of that technology in-house. We have trademarked a credit building system called Credit Connect Now. It's basically a white labeled Credit Karma that only promotes our loans. So instead of saying, hey, go out to Credit Karma and monitor your credit score with the unintended consequence of being inundated with offers from other financial institutions, I want you to go through that same process with our private, tool. And the only offers you'll be exposed to are our offers, and you don't have to worry about being exploited. So we have to pay attention to technology. We can't ignore it because some technology, if we ignore it, your members are going to see it and use it. And you have to ask yourself, will it bring them closer to you or further away from you? And if it will take them away from you, you got to deal with it.
So that's a great segue into our last section, which I definitely want to get to because these are takeaways for everyone on the call today around strategies that your credit union can implement in 2022. And not just any strategies, but help you move ahead of your competitors. And let's get right into it. What should credit unions be focused on? If you had to say one thing, what should they be focused on in 2022? And we'll get to your top 3 things to do in a second. And I'll start with Dan. I'm going to go clockwise according to what I see.
Cool. So the only thing that should matter is, are you the easiest place to do business with? Whether it's digital channels, whether it's on the phone, or whether it's in person. That's ours.
Okay, Michael?
Echo what Daniel said. I think my biggest thing is remind yourself that, you know, your customers or your members are not judging you by the experience that they had with you last. They're judging you by the experience they had overall last. And so, you know, one of the things I'd recommend doing, and this is a best practice we had from a client when I used to run an agency, is they would bring in their youngest employees, their interns, and they would sit down with the executive team every month or every quarter, and they would say, show me the apps that you're using right now. And the idea behind that is, I know that's skewed towards a younger, you know, demographic maybe than we typically attract in the credit union, but you start seeing innovation that's happening. And so I think, you know, we have to really look at it, you know, video games, you know, what it's like to have an experience when you order a movie in your house and how seamless it is. We have to really realize that, you know, our members are going to ask us questions. Why can't I do that here? You know, last one, I'm sipping a Starbucks. I love that in the Starbucks app, it remembers what I ordered last and I can do it in one click. Why would you think your member wouldn't say, don't you remember that I had a mortgage with you and I had this? Why are you asking me to fill out all my information again? You know, so these are the things that we really do need to remain competitive.
Sherod?
You know, I'm in a strange place. We're in the process of converting our core, converting our debit cards, converting our credit cards. And so I'm going to respond to that question from the perspective of operation. It's imperative to have your arms around your contracts, your expiration dates, the terms, the requirements. If you are going to embark upon a strategy to move your credit union in a particular direction, you need to understand the terms and the expiration dates on all of the vendors you're dealing with, because all of them may potentially come into play. How many of us have been satisfied with the vendor just to look up and find out that you missed the notification date to let them know that you're going to not renew by a week or 2 or 3. So have a broad strategy. Part of that strategy is to identify all the relevant dates for all of the vendors that you're doing business with, because that is going to be very important as you move forward to execute that strategy.
Ted?
I'll say as we move from sort of tactics up to strategy, everyone's going to have different tactics. I would just remind and emphasize focusing on relative advantage strategically. And that is the existing membership. Let's not forget them. This is the most powerful thing we have as incumbents in this new environment, which has many entrants trying to get at your members. So at the end of the day, it's still financial services. Whether you're Chime and have a multi-billion-dollar marketing budget, it still is very difficult to unlodge the incumbent. And we need to focus on making it even harder, because that credit unions as an industry grew out of a traditional way of acquiring those members. Now we have them. We have to focus on keeping them. And that means developing new competencies, which is bringing new technologies and services to that base. So if you had to make a strategic choice between trying to go out and find a brand new relationship or solidify an existing one and getting more and serving that household with more needs, I would make the argument to choose that existing one, because that's the relative advantage that credit unions have compared to a lot of the neobanks and the new entrants.
And finally, Julie.
I'm going to say ditto to all of the above, but I'm going to highlight it out with saying member experience, whether existing or new, is really important. I like to focus on the fact that credit unions really care about their members, their well-being of their members. So using technology, behavioral economics, AI to make things more proactive than reactive. People don't like to think about things. I use the example right at the beginning of the year. Everyone's trying to, eat better, lose weight. If you put carrot sticks and a little ranch dip in front of me or a bowl of chocolate ice cream, I'm gonna be like, heck yeah, I love chocolate ice cream. But if someone puts in front of me the carrot sticks with the dip and says, wow, this is a great choice for you, let me tell you why. And kind of makes that diagnosis or analysis for you and puts it in front of you, or gives you the tool to do it yourself without having to look at, oh my gosh, I spent $10 here and $20 there. And in a way that can be personalized. And so that's all through technology. And I think that is key, that, we care and we're trying to help you be financially well.
Well, that is really good. I think there's some really good advice here for credit unions to start getting focused for 2022. I mean, it's no secret that the big banks and neobanks are busily innovating and acquiring more customers, but that doesn't mean credit unions have to sit on the sidelines or continue to do things the way we did them in 2005 or even 2010 or last year. You can differentiate and disrupt financial services in 2022. Leverage your service, introduce small innovations. We've talked about a number of them here, based on whether you're identifying niche groups within your membership base or just improving experiences for everybody, and focus on reducing friction for the member, not just efficiencies for the operations. And as Ted and Dan and everyone else has talked about, focusing on the member rather than the credit union. And I think that's a good way to wrap things up for today. And I'm going to toss it back to Lori.
Great. I really enjoyed this conversation. And thanks to everyone that joined. We did answer a number of audience questions during the discussion, but there's a couple remaining that I'd love to ask the group. The first one, hot topic, indirect lending. So we could also say direct, but indirect lending has always been a source of new membership for credit unions, but these relationships often close out when the loan is paid off or refinanced. What are some things that the panelists have done to maintain and expand these relationships? Anyone want to go first?
Tell you what, I'll jump in by saying we're not great at this either. And I think the industry trend I've seen is about 3%. If you get an auto loan, it's about a 3% chance you're going to get another product adoption. So that's the latest stat I've seen. Maybe somebody has something else, but I think we can all agree that's generally the trend. The one thing I would just say is if they're your member and that means they have an auto loan with us, that means that you can know more about them. So utilize what you know, and I want to go back to the data so that you know their habits so that you can tailor an offer to them. But just sending them a folder, letting them know all the services you have, the truth is they don't care, right? So like show them something that lets them know you know about them and that you know about them at the right time in their life cycle. You know how old they are. You have a sense of how much money they make. Use that data to be able to make an offer that is actually appealing to that person.
Great. Anyone else want to weigh in? I've got one more question from the audience.
I'll just weigh in and say, we don't do a whole lot of indirect lending anymore. We're still part of the program in case our members do go to a dealer. I've been with DCU for a very long time, and it's so long that I remember when we were doing indirect lending, we would actually call the new indirect members, and that was very successful because you're having a conversation with them. But that was a long time ago, and first of all, people don't answer their phones anymore unless they know who's on the other end. So digital onboarding, we did a campaign. We saw a little boost there. But I do have to agree that, they want that auto loan and they're getting it from the dealership and they don't know who you are. So that is a tough relationship to catch.
Okay, I'm going to close it out with the final question, which I think is a pretty simple one to answer, but I'm wondering if the audience or the panelists have a different take on this. What is the difference between a digital credit union and an online credit union?
I would just say digital first, meaning if you're only online, you don't have branches. We are a combination of providing online and mobile services and everything digitally, as well as we have, a branch network for people to come in. And I think credit unions are very well known for trying to be all things to all people. And I think that's a kind of a delicate balance, but I guess that would be my opinion.
I don't think people care. I mean, regular people, your members, your potential members, your existing members. It's
Yeah.
just banking.
Right, as long as they can bank the
Yeah.
way they want to bank.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure that it's a difference without meaning, except here, you know.
But I do think that kind of trying to characterize who you are informs who your potential members are. So just from the perspective of give you some insight into if we are this, then this is where we go for our membership. We're going through a reinvention as a credit union, and our strategic session is just that. Who are we?
Right.
Are we a digital credit union? We are shared branching. We have multiple branches through that. We have an ownership stake in co-op. So we're struggling with how do we effectively articulate who we are, just from the perspective of being able to advise my team
Right.
as to where to go with things. Because if they don't really know who we are, it makes it challenging for them to articulate that and for them to see where the real opportunities are.
No, I think you're exactly right. If you don't know who you are, how can your members or prospective members know or even care?
I just hired a community engagement director who during the holidays was out meeting with clients, and I was shocked because he'd been with us for 5 minutes and he's meeting with employers. And I asked him, what's our value proposition? And he just kind of fell back and he was like, and I stated, I don't know today. We're in this transformational point. How are you out representing us to the public without being clear on who we are internally? So that's a very important point.
Right. Right. And I think credit unions already have that base of who they are and with the mission and your membership requirements. But there's still tons of data, which I know Dan and Michael have talked about, that can fill in and identify new niches inside of those areas that I think make you a better digital credit union, or if whatever is defining you. That's kind of where I see that.
I think
Dan?
that's, oh, I was just going to say, I think that's a really great place to kind of leave it. Really fascinating discussion. I'm so glad that you were all able to attend. And don't forget, you're going to get a recording of this over email. So look out for that. And thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Take care.
Thank you,
Bye, bye.
everyone.